So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to our webinar on adapting the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan in Asia. My name is Mohammad Awais Shafiq, an assistant professor at the University of Central Punjab in Pakistan, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator for this insightful session. Next slide. So Mobilize Your City and this particular training session is backed by a noteworthy consortium as shown in this slide. At the same time, I would like to inform the participants from Pakistan that this webinar will earn them zero point 0.5 CPD points, contributing towards their professional engineer status. As a proof of your participation, we'll be taking snaps of participants anytime during the session. So you are requested to ensure your continuous presence with your complete name displayed. Next slide. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. Keep your microphone muted and your camera turned off if you don't want to appear in the recording. Please include your questions in the chat and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end. Slide. So, as many of you are aware, urban mobility is a significant challenge in many parts of Asia, particularly in rapidly growing cities. In Pakistan, cities like Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, they face daily traffic congestion, increasing air pollution, and the urgent need to be for more efficient public transportation systems. These issues not only hinder economic growth, but also affect the quality of life for millions of residents. Today, we are here to address these critical challenges and explore solutions through sustainable urban mobility planning. The Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, or SUMPs in short, offer a holistic and integrated approach to urban transport planning, aiming to create a more accessible, efficient, and sustainable urban mobility systems. Next slide, please. Okay, keeping this in mind, today's lecture can be divided into two main sections. Firstly, the Mobilize Your City Partnership will be presented and the concept of SUMP be introduced. The second part will discuss the adaptability of SUMPs in Asian cities. Slide, please. We are honored to have two distinguished speakers with us today, both experts in the field of sustainable urban mobility. First, we have Mr. Nicholas Cruz Gonzalez, a sustainable mobility expert at the Mobilize Your City Secretariat. Mr. Nicholas brings extensive experience in developing and implementing sustainable mobility solutions in various urban contexts. Our second speaker is Mr. Clement Moselle, the program manager for Mobilize Your City Asia. Mr. Clement has been instrumental in promoting sustainable urban mobility across Asian cities and has a wealth of knowledge in program management and policy development. Next slide. So during today's session, we have four main objectives that we are going to cover up. Firstly, present the specificities of urban mobility challenges for cities in the global south. So we will discuss the challenges faced by cities in developing regions with a focus on the complexities and nuisances of urban mobility in these contexts. Secondly, define the SUMP concept and why it supports sustainable mobility planning. Our experts will explain what SUMPs are and how they contribute to creating sustainable, livable cities. Thirdly is to describe the main phases and steps in preparing a SUMP. You will learn about the structural approach to developing a SUMP, including key phases and practical steps. Lastly, present real case studies on SUMP development in Asia. So we will showcase real-life examples of successful SUMP implementation in Asian cities, demonstrating the tangible benefits and the positive impacts. So I encourage you all To engage actively during sessions, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat box, and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Without further ado, let's dive into our first topic and hear from our expert, Mr. Nicholas Cruz Gonzalez. Nicholas, the floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for you all, and thank you for participating in this webinar in which we will discuss many topics, including sustainable urban mobility, the challenges that we've identified in Mobilize Your City for cities in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, but then also the collaboration that we have with different institutions for Asia. So I'm Nicolas Cruz, I'm Sustainable Mobility Expert at the Mobilize Your City Secretariat. And then for those that do not know what Mobilize Your City is, I'm gonna start with a very brief presentation about the partnership. So the partnership is an organization that tries to link urban mobility challenges with global issues, and then I will develop this idea a bit further with the next slides. So Mobilize Your City is a partnership constituted by different partners, mainly the French, the German governments, and the European Union, and it was established during the COP21 in Paris as a way to elevate urban mobility planning as to reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions mainly. So we have different donors from the French government, the AFD, the FFM, and the Ministry for Ecological Transition. We have also some other donors from the German side, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Ministry for Environment. And then also the European Commission gives some funding, and it's our major donor actually. And then what we try to do is to channel these contributions, financing contributions from our donors. So our implementing partners, that are the partners that you can see on the second line, can actually implement projects related to sustainable urban mobility planning at both the local and the national level. So sustainable urban mobility plans, there is a topic that brings us today here. But then also the national version of the mobility planning, there is the national urban mobility policies or investment programs, also proposed by Mobilize Your City for national governments. So we also have some knowledge and network partners with whom we try to address knowledge gaps and to encourage discussions on pressing topics that we've identified with the past experience of Mobilize Your City. And as you can see, we have very prestigious partners in which we try to cover specifically topics of sustainable urban mobility planning, of course, greenhouse gas emissions accounting, also paratransit reform, urban mobility governance, and active modes of transport. And then we also collaborate with different activities, global or regional, Euroclim in Latin America, digital transport for Africa in Africa, to me at the global level. And then it's not here in collaboration with because it's very embedded in the Mobilize Your City partnership, but we also have the Mobilize Your City Asia program that Clement will present later on. So this is the global partnership because besides the institutional partners that I just presented on the previous slides, we also have cities and countries that are joining the partnership. Expressions of interest to join the partnership are constantly open. There is no deadlines or calls. If your city or your country are interested in joining the partnership, it's always open to do so just by contacting the Secretariat. And then you can see we have members all over the world, from Latin America to Africa to Eastern Europe and Asia. And then the partnership, at the partnership, what we offer is 4 service areas for our members. So it's first of all, the urban mobility planning that I was mentioning before. So this takes the form of technical assistance projects on the ground through our implementing partners, mainly to support cities and countries to develop either sustainable urban mobility plans, SUMPs, and this is a concept that I'm gonna be repeating quite often, as SUMPs, or the national urban mobility policies, the NUPs, at the national level. So we have 72 cities and 16 countries that are members of Mobilize Your City, and around half of them receive technical assistance from our implementing partners. So around half of the cities and countries are developing urban mobility planning documents at the moment, or either they already finalized the projects or they're they're doing it at the moment. Along with the mobility planning activities that we propose, we also have capacity building activities, because not only the technical assistance they're receiving, it's the implementing partner supporting in developing the SUMP or the NUMP, but also to try to increase capacities and to enhance capacities of local authorities and national governments in order to ensure the implementation of the SUMPs, but also to make most of it, because at the end it's the local authorities that have a better overview and knowledge of their own contexts. So we do two kind of activities. We develop methodologies, and we try to close knowledge gaps about the topics that we consider important for urban mobility planning in Mobilize Your City geographies. And then we also prepare training sessions, as the one we're having here today, in online format or in-person meetings, to gather our regional communities of practice in Asia, Africa, Latin America. And this is a space for people to receive training, be trained, but also share experience and do peer-to-peer collaborative knowledge based on the experiences they have in their own context. We also do some advocacy. So we try to elevate the topics that we've identified are important for sustainable urban mobility planning. And we do it at two different levels. So at the local level, we try to promote sustainable urban mobility first as a political topic. So for elected public servants, mayors, governors, or something of the sort, that they have to include, and it's better to include sustainable urban mobility to impact the quality of life in cities. And then we also try to give some ideas on how to do it. But then we also do it at an international level to elevate the topic of sustainable urban mobility in international events. For example, at the climate conference that happen every year, at the World Urban Forum. So we try to keep the topic alive so we don't forget it, and also to have nexus with other relevant topics that are discussed in these international events that are normally linked to global challenges, like, for example, climate change. And then Mobilize Your City, what we try to do is to make this link between the local challenges that cities face, for example, congestion, air quality, and road safety, to the global level of climate change, because gladly climate objectives and urban mobility objectives are aligned, and Mobilize Your City try to take advantage of this opportunity in order to do better planning for the cities. And then the fourth service area, it's implementation support. And this has to do with the first service area, because once the SUMs and the NUMs are completed and adopted, we try to find some additional support to actually prepare projects that are aligned to the action plan that was proposed at the SUMP. This is the services that Mobilize Your City offer. And this, of course, is aligned with our vision. Our vision is at the global level. We would like to influence the urban context to have more efficient, safe, and just cities based on their transport system. And then in our mission, we would like to incubate these solutions and accelerate the adoption of proven approaches to transform urban mobility in a sustainable way. And then in order to accomplish this vision and to reach this mission, we have 4 objectives. So accelerate the green and just transition to sustainable urban mobility, facilitate access to sustainable innovative finance, because this is something that is very important to implement sustainable urban mobility projects, and is to have different ways of getting funding and financing. Foster more comprehensive, integrated, and participatory urban mobility planning. And this is important, not to think by sector or only one mode of transport, or not including all the stakeholders that are involved in urban mobility, but to really have a comprehensive plan that gathers everyone and that considers all the sides of urban mobility. That you will see it's much more complex than only traffic management and roads construction and maintenance. And then also we try to close the investment gap for sustainable mobility. And this is just to support the paradigm shift from traditional transport planning to sustainable urban mobility. And this is some results from the contributions from our donors. So from 2016 to today, so we've had a contribution of 54.7 million euros in technical assistance. And then from these contributions, we already completed 19 SUMPs and 6 NUMPs from member cities and countries. These are projects implemented by our implementing partners. And then, the final result of these technical assistances are the policy documents that include an action plan. So it's a long list of measures that the cities and countries should implement in the short, medium, and long term. And about this, Clement is going to talk about a bit more later on. But so the projects that are proposed in the completed SUMPs and NUMPs so far have an investment need of 27.62 billion euros. So it's a lot of money that is needed to implement all the projects that are proposed. But then the good news is that from all this investment need identified, we've already leveraged some finance around 1.75 billion euros. That is not minor at the national level, and then also at the local level. And then this has come from different sources, not only international loans and international grants. That is the part that Mobilize Your City supports with the most, but also some domestic allocation of funding. And this is because authorities realize that it's time to assign budget to implement this kind of projects. And then from the secured finance that we have so far, it's 1.5 billion euros. You see the share of the type of project. So mostly the biggest part goes to public transport infrastructure, metro lines, BRT, corridors, and also hub stations and depots. There is also 20% leverage finance on rolling stock, so mainly buses. And then some other allocation of budgets for roads and public space and walking and cycling that you see. It's very tiny compared to the other projects. But then this doesn't mean it's because it's not enough, but it's also because the projects related to walking and cycling are way cheaper than any other kind of projects in transport. And then the final part is that with these projects that are already in place and moving forward, we will have, and then with the overall impact of the SUMPs and the NUMPs, we'll have some impact associated with the greenhouse gas emissions, also access to public transport, like increase in access for public transport, and then also some road safety outcomes related to the improvement of the urban mobility. So this is the overall introduction to the partnership. And then the next part of my presentation is going to be more about the topics and the content that we try to advocate for when we have a project and Mobilize Your City. I would remind you now, if you have any questions, you could send them on the chat, and then we will try to gather all the questions and comments that you might have by the end of the session. We will have some time to have a discussion. Otherwise, you will be able also to open your microphone and speak up. So moving forward, I'm going to talk about, before talking about sustainable urban mobility, I'm going to give an overall overview of sustainable development and the sustainable development goals. And this I do just because it's important to remember where this is coming from. And before having a concept of sustainable urban mobility, there is a broader concept of sustainable development. So I think it's also interesting to try to link these two in order to understand why we promote what we promote. So the concept of sustainable development, and maybe this is something that you've already seen in other sectors or maybe also before, is this kind of development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is, let's say, advanced concept of what development should be, because it makes us conscious of not taking everything that is available now, because there is people coming after us that will be also needing resources, energy, and some other assets that the planet has. And we need to be conscious that we cannot use them all at once just for us. And this requires some planning then, because without knowing what's going to happen in the future, it's very difficult to know what we can do in the present. And this is how planning in general is so important, because then you can see what's happening now, what can happen in the future, and then you could assignate resources according to this. Also, to have this balance that you can see on the screen between the needs that you have now and the limitations. So the needs for all kind of people, and also for all essential activities in society, and then also the limitations to meet the present needs, but also the future needs. So there is always this trade-off between what I want to do and then what I can do with what I have. And then the other dimension of this is considering not only people, but also the economic side, the profits that I can get out of it, because it's impossible to think about sustainable development without thinking in economic development. But then also the planet, and this is the environmental dimension. And this also has to do with this thinking forward in the future, because even if we have resources, we cannot have a polluted environment in which people are not able to live properly or in health. So as you see, this concept of sustainable development is quite broad and quite complex, but then there is ways of accomplishing this, and gladly there is different stakeholders that pursue kind of the same objectives, but that act from different perspectives. And the way to reach these objectives that sustainable development propose, we think that adapted governance should be in place. Also because this trend of thinking on sustainable development is quite recent. And so governments really need to adapt their governance in order to have success in this endeavor. So there is this need of balancing social, environmental, and economic dimensions, but then we have this three-part arrangement of stakeholders: public authorities in all levels, national, regional, and local; private sector, that can take the form of a multinational company, or companies of national character, or local companies as well. They're all important because they have different ways to act. and then also the civil society, associations, NGO, but also the citizens. And this dialogue between the stakeholders that we see here um, are important in order to pursue this sustainable development. And then it's important to mention that at the global level, we already set some goals, so more concrete things and activities that we should pursue in order to accomplish some objectives. Uh, in what we decided, it was the vision of sustainable development at the global level. So the UN proposed these 17 sustainable development goals that for sure you already know. And they have to do with many different dimensions that are quite more specific, but also more complex than the ones that I just mentioned before, the human, environmental, and social dimensions. And they just try to cover different sectors that are important in order to have a peaceful but also a sustainable world. From no poverty to peace building and land use. And then why it's important here, and then if you go into the topic, you will see that also each of the goals have different sub targets, so way more specific than the things that you see here. And then what I would like to, and this is debatable what I'm going to show next, but of course this is at Mobilize Your City, what how we think that uh, sustainable development goals are related to urban mobility. And it's, of course, for example, the SDG 3, good health and well-being, because promoting, for example, active modes of transport has an impact on your physical activity. So maybe people that cycle and walk have more, let's say, a better health. Uh, Then also gender equality. There is a huge part of the transport community that is working on gender equality in transport. And this is because the way people move around the cities is different based on gender. So also the gender roles that women have are different from those that men have. And this has an impact on how they move around the city, the modes they choose to travel, and also the conditions and the experience of the travel. So there is a huge work on gender dimension that we can do. There is also decent work and economic growth, because there is a whole community of people working in transport that support the service that is provided. And of course, infrastructure related to the projects that are developed, sustainable cities and communities, because some say that for example, public transport is the backbone of a city. Climate action, and this is not necessarily true for all transport projects, but at Mobilize Your City, we try to do this link that all projects proposed in a SUMP should be climate compatible, both with mitigation and adaptation. Peace, justice, and strong institutions, because transport and urban mobility in general are normally managed by public institutions, and we need stronger institutions to make to pursue the success of the SUMPs and the NUMPs. And then also partnership for the goals, because as for example, Mobilize Your City, we need to work together in order to accomplish the objectives that we set. And this slide is only to show why this is important and why we should be talking about why, for example, Mobilize Your City is kind of relevant, or we think it's relevant. And it's because there is a huge challenge of urbanization all over the world. So you see in 2030, and this is a projection of the UN, there will be more than 25 or 30 megacities with more than 10 million people. And as you can see, the challenge in Asia is very pressing, because people are moving to cities to get all the services provided, to get all the benefits of being in a city. And then it implies that while the cities grow, we need to provide better services, because even if people are all together, they need to have transport supply in order to access the thing they want to access: services, education, jobs, leisure, and so on. and then we're still not decreasing the population. The population keeps on growing, and then we need to think on how to provide this access that the cities demand, but also to link it with the global challenge of climate change. So this is also a way to rethink how we manage urban mobility, because before we were talking about transport management, and then the logic behind was that the economic growth implies an increase in mobility, of course, because the richer the people, the more they move in the city. But then it was with the thought that as people were getting rich, they would also get a car. So car ownership would increase, and then the evident solution was to provide more road infrastructure in order to support all the demand for space that the cars had. And then we would get all these books about highways constructions or traffic management. And then this was a very motorized and carbonized mobility-centered way of thinking transport. Because in this approach, traffic is the key. So we don't want to have traffic in the cities. It's a monomodal approach because it's mainly related to cars and car management and ownership. Infrastructure based because this is the only way to increase the levels of service for a highway, for example, adding more lanes. And this means there is like very expensive and costly project approach, because we would identify um, at the micro level, for example, in an intersection that something is needed there. And then we would propose, for example, an overpass or a bridge or anything else. So there's not this comprehensive and city level planning, only transport. And this means like moving from point A to point B, but it doesn't really consider any other dimension of mobility. Also short and middle terms, and then also only for one institutional area, but also limited impact assessment. So this is the paradigm. I live a bit far from the center, and then I have to go to work. And then fortunately, I have a car, but then at some point we realized that adding more lanes to highways are not gonna solve the problem, also because it has an induced demand that normally we didn't consider, and we ended up with a lot of highways just stuck in traffic. So as I was mentioning before, and the idea is that we need to be conscious also of the environmental impact that this has. And then, for example, being conscious that 50% of emissions come from urban transport, and it accounts 28% of global emissions. So we need to, and it's the sector with the highest growth rate. It's not decreasing, and it's one of the few sectors that is not decreasing its emissions. So we need to act on this problem. And then at the same time, and as I was mentioning before, we need to be conscious of the congestion and the road safety issues that the cities are facing, because being stuck in traffic also means that people are moving slowly and they're wasting time that they could be spending in some other more meaningful activities. And then not being in a reliable city also costs a lot, because then you will lose more time trying to plan your trip, and then maybe also pay more because everything is more expensive when you're stuck in traffic. Um, Purely infrastructure-based solutions are inefficient, because then you're tackling the problem with a very narrow view, and then you're not having like a proper comprehensive planning instrument in place. An integrated approach should include all modes of transport, because also driving is not the only way to move around the city, and it's important to acknowledge that, and also to think urbanism and mobility integration as a way to tackle the problem. And then also this paradigm change that we're proposing is relevant, because as you see, and this is data collected from Mobilize Your City members, is that the car is normally not the most popular mode of transport that is chosen in our city. So as you can see, the green colors are walking. So, for example, in Africa, we can have cities with up to 70% modal share of walking, and it's contradictory to plan for cars when it's only less than 5% of modal share and neglecting the people that walk. And then, for example, in Asia, it's more the public transport or the paratransit services that play a key role. And then instead of thinking in cars, we should really focus on the modes that are important in our cities. And in order to know these kind of things, we need to collect data at the local level and in the local context. Otherwise, we will get only the influence of the cities that have data that is normally the global north. Um, but then we need to plan for the situations and the dynamics that we have in our own cities. And then also not only for what's happening now that I showed you in the model shared before, but also the kind of cities that we want to become, because there is, for example, some trends, and the Mobilize Your City cities are here if you consider transport emissions and the GDP, that you can have models in which cities are car-based, with a lot of roads available, but also very expanded because they're very not very dense. So public transport is not a solution, because you need density in a city to develop public transport. So this only means that you will plan a city going up on emissions as you increase your GDP. But we can also cut a bit that trend and propose a new model in which you can have very good public transport provision, uh, but then also have important economic growth. This is for why the topic is important and why we're talking at the moment. And now what I'm gonna introduce is the concept of, sustainable urban mobility. So I was talking about the challenges before, and now I'm gonna present what we propose at Mobilize Your City in order to act on the topic. Um, Muhammad, can you confirm that you're still seeing my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So our vision for sustainable urban mobility is that it should be low carbon, being conscious of the climate challenge that we face. It should be efficient in terms of resource allocation, but also the investment that we have. So with the money we have, we should make the most efficient investment. It should be safe and just, and this means that we should be conscious of these road safety issues that the cities officially normally face. Um, and just means that it should be accessible for everyone. So men, women, uh, high income, low income segments of the population, the elderly, children, and so on. And this means that we should put people in the center of the whole process of planning urban mobility. We should consider all modes of transport and services because they should contribute to the same objective and pursue the same objective, even though they operate in different ways. And then it should be planned at the scale of the functional urban area. And this is a important concept because um, let's say the cities have some administrative boundaries that normally do not match with the influence the city has in the travel patterns. Normally, it's attracting a lot of people from some other places beyond their administrative boundaries. And when we plan, it's important to plan for everyone that access the service that the city provides. So it's important to work for equity, and this is something that is overlooked sometimes in policy making in urban mobility. And it's that because we don't normally consider other modes of transport, we're not used to consider these modes of transport, we overlook them a bit. And then we don't recognize, for example, the key job services and education that is accessed also by these alternative modes of transport. Um, Urban mobility can represent a high share of daily wages, and this is true for example, the workers of the paratransit services that exist all over the world. A car-oriented mobility policy is inequitable because if you check car ownership in emerging economies is not very high compared to, for example, public transport ridership or rates of walking and cycling. And the allocation of budget is quite high when you're going to develop a car center infrastructure project, for example. Public transport and active modes for social equity because everyone can cycle around. I mean, everyone, different social classes, different ages, different genders, they can get a bike to cycle around the city if the conditions are in place. And then also it's important to acknowledge the role of of paratransit in providing services for the city. There is some barriers to achieve this that we're proposing, so barriers to sustainable mobility, and normally they're related to lack of budget for funding projects in this aspect. There is limited skills for staff, and this is the city officials that are working at the local level. Sometimes there is no clear-cut responsibilities because these are kind of new projects that the city is not used to deal with. So this problem of transport planning, focusing on infrastructure, individual projects, there is a lack of stakeholder involvement because stakeholders are not normally called to participate in preparing these kind of projects. It's difficult to resolving target conflicts between different road user and urban functions. So as you're seeing the picture, this is quite normal in our cities, and this is the kind of things that we could solve easily if we could plan better for different users. And there is this lack of vision into the future on what kind of city we want to have. So we go back again to this three stakeholder arrangement that we mentioned at the beginning. So having the civil society, private sector, also public institutions working together for a better and a better and a more livable city, advocating for an efficient use of resources. So the best projects with the maximized global impacts, considering different mobility service, a systemic approach that is very important. So you see and it's a complex system, urban mobility in a city, in which you can have the influence from different public policies in place, and then also how it's linked to the international national objectives related to greenhouse gas emissions and sustainable development goals. So to do so, and I'm gonna be running a bit later than expected, but I hope it's fine. We propose the EASI approach for sustainable urban mobility. And this is a basic concept for transport planning, for sustainable urban mobility planning, in which we propose four different kinds of, we don't propose it, we took it from someone else. We propose four different kind of actions in order to reach these objectives I've been talking about in this minute. So the first one is enable. The second one is avoid. The third one is shift, and the fourth one is improve. And then in the next slides, I'm gonna go more into the detail of what this means. So the enable part is related to governance efficiency, because without having the institutions in place and the institutional arrangements in place to implement sustainable urban mobility projects, it's very difficult to make them successful. And this has to do with establishing this effective and responsible governance system, with the adequate institutions, but also the human resources and the proper financing. So we need the setting with the adequate institutions, but also we have the people being in the settings with the capacities and the knowledge, and then also the economic resources in order to do their work. So this is at the institutional level. And then we have the technical types of actions, so avoid, and then this is related to land use efficiency and is the kind of actions that we see are more difficult to implement. But then basically this proposes to avoid and cut the need for traveling around the city, because the most sustainable trip is the one that you don't do because it's not needed, and minimize the need for individual motorized journeys through appropriate land use, transport planning, and management. And this has to do, for example, with making houses or housing more close to job provision or economic centers, because people need to travel less or not to travel at all. And this I'm going to also explain later on. The shift side is related to multimodal transport system and efficiency, and this is recognizing there is different modes of transport, and some modes of transport are more sustainable than others. So in the case that you cannot avoid the travels or the trips, it's better if you do it in a more sustainable way. So maintain or increase the modal shares of more socially and environmentally sustainable modes, for example, public transport and non-motorized transport. And then on the improved side, this is related to road space use and vehicle efficiency. So this is basically improving the efficiency of the mobility system, considering, for example, traffic management. So traffic management is included in the ASI approach, but also, for example, vehicle efficiency. The energy we use to fuel our vehicles is also important, and that's why, for example, we talk about electric mobility in sustainable mobility. So E for enable means that competences should be clarified among institutions. There should be an organization or an institution taking main responsibility of this mobility planning. And then also this institution has the adequate human resources and trained staff in order to implement the projects and also propose the projects. There is a financial allocation of resources because proposed projects without financing are very difficult to implement. Public and private sectors are associated, so there is a dialogue, and it doesn't have to do that they have to agree on everything, but at least that they have a channel of communication to propose the projects, because at the end the policies are made for people. And then there is this consultation of civil society and citizen, and it's also related to stakeholder engagement in order to have more successful and adequate projects proposed. And then, of course, the coordination between the national and local level is important, and that's why we also promote this concept of NOMs, so policies at the national level. So for avoids, and it's the next side of the ASI concept, there is 3 ways. So limit travels. So the most sustainable mobility is when you don't travel at all, and this could be, for example, strategies to do home office, or e-shopping, or online services from the state. So what you normally would need to go somewhere and access something, you could do it from your place with a computer and internet. There is also a way to promote short distances and active modes. If you don't need to travel, do it in short distances. And this is placing, for example, housing very close to the economic centers. So this is more related to urban planning, and then use sustainable modes for long distance. If you need to travel, use more sustainable modes. So for the avoid part, you can have diversity. So passing from a mono-central arrangement of a city to a multi-central arrangement. So you're closer to center of activities with the most of the services. This is very related, for example, to the 15-minute city concept. Also density. And density is related to the TOD concept, the transport-oriented development, because In the most dense areas, you can have public transport provision, and then also short trip distances are more easy to do. And then also improve design, for example, gaining space for walking and cycling as opposed to the cars. For the S side, there is shift. So this is acknowledging different modes of transport and then shifting towards the most sustainable ones. So here you see this is for transport planners that were very concerned about capacity and levels of service. So you can see here how the capacity of different modes. So you can see, for example, cyclists are not very low compared to also BRT lines. Of course, the conditions are different, and also the speed is different, but we can also deliver on capacity with different modes. And then you see the difference in energy intensity, and this is the kind of analysis that we don't normally do in transport planning. But then when you see the energy, is way more efficient to have a person walking than having someone take a car or a taxi. And then also the energy source that you have. So we should encourage people to go through the most sustainable ways that are basically active modes of transport, for which we need to make safe and continuous networks, safe and preserved sidewalks, and then also make it more accessible, more connected, and so on. There is a need to develop more public transport, that so increase the supply, coverage the whole functional areas, to also think about beyond the administrative boundaries, to enhance the frequency and capacity, the levels of service, and make it affordable, and if possible, integrated with other modes. And then also limit the use of individual cars. So there is measures that aim to reduce the speed limits, put in place low emission zones in which cars are not allowed, congestion tolls, vehicle registration license, parking policies. So not only to increase the provision, but also limit the use of the cars. And then the last one is improve, and this is improve the efficiency of mobility as a whole. So decreasing congestion and increasing the number of passengers per vehicle. So this is related to better planning, for example, the public transport system, but also traffic management. And this is what public authorities can do at the local level, but then at the broader level, also policies in place to improve energy efficiency of vehicles. So from eco driving to electric mobility. Now that we're also talking about hydrogen to fuel and power our cars, buses, and metro lines, and then promote the link to energy sectors, because also it doesn't make sense to talk about electric mobility without bringing in the discussion of renewable energies. And then yeah, this is pretty much what sustainable mobility entails, from having a good governance to avoiding trips by land use planning, to shifting to more efficient ways of traveling and enhancing the efficiency of the system. This is what for Mobilize Your City we propose to include. And then this is the kind of things we try to advocate for in the different regions. And then, of course, we do it we do it through this concept of the SUMP, so the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan that I've been talking. I'm not gonna go into the detail because Clement, this is the thing that he's gonna present, so I will leave it for him. But then before that, why we think this is important, and then I think pretty much I mentioned most of it, but to make a summary and some takeaways from my presentation, there is a need in our cities to increase the technical capacities of local governments. As for example, some local authorities or transport authorities are newborn, and there is this opportunity to link what they're going to do with climate compatible objectives and also sustainable urban mobility objectives. So we can establish this governance compatible with the sustainability principles. there is a chance to maintain low levels of private motorization and car ownership, and a high modal share of walking, because this is the case in many Mobilize Your City members. And then there is this urgency to transform and regulate paratransit services and informal transport, because in many cities is the main, if not the only, mode of transport in the global south. And this is true also for the Asian continent. So this is the kind of topics and let's say opportunities, challenges that we've been trying to explain during international events, for example, and very related to Asia. A couple of weeks ago, we participated in the Asia and the Pacific Transport Forum organized by the Asian Development Bank, one of our partners. And then together with AFD, ITDP Indonesia, and IDOM, we discussed how non-motorized transport, so active modes, can change our cities. Clement was also there with us, and then we had a very interesting discussion with examples from Asia, in Pakistan, and also in Indonesia. And then just to, before give the floor to Clement, I'm gonna present this video in which we have a summary of what happened last year in November in the headquarters of the Asian Development Bank in Manila. We have our first Mobilize Your City Asia regional event. So I will play the video so you see what happened there and our work in Asia.
To ensure people get around cities is very important. It means how they get to work, how they get to school, how they get to social meet up with their friends, and how they get to hospitals for emergencies and other medical appointments. Therefore, transport must provide a good system for everybody to get around. At the Asian Development Bank, we estimate that 1.3 billion people have poor access for urban transport, urban public transport, and that is one of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals.
I would like to ADB or other development partner to study for the possibility for the mass transit of the Phnom Penh city, because we need the modern transportation for the promoting the people to share the model as we plan to people to share the mooring the model of 30% of the population in Phnom Penh.
I believe that global partnerships can amplify our results, the results of our actions, and ensuring the impact of our actions, not only at the national level, but also at the international and global level. Also, to work in partnership gives us accountability, because everybody is responsible for its action, which is essential to work towards the achievement of our goals. And in the case of Mobilize Your City, towards the goal of sustainable urban mobility.
Mobilize Your City Partnership is for us an occasion to link and to connect with cities, local governments, national governments, knowledge partners, and development partners in order to address the specific challenges of urban mobility in developing and emerging countries, which are specific, and also in order to do that in a way which is targeting sustainable development goals.
In Asian cities, mainly in secondary cities, paratransit is usually becoming the main public transport mode in the cities.
So that was pretty much the event, Mobilize Your City event in Asia last year. and we hope to have a couple more. Thank you very much for your time, for being there. I will leave the floor to Muhammad then.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I would now invite Mr. Clement to present his topic.
Yeah, thank you,
Over to you.
Mohamed. Thank you, Nicolas. So yes, it's great to also to speak about Mobilize Your City from a regional perspective, because Nicolas presented like the partnership in the broad aspect from a large overview, but it's also important all that because all what the Secretariat and all what is done at the global level, it has an implementation at the regional and local level. So next, Nicolas, for the slide, what is Mobilize Your City in Asia, particularly? Next. So basically, as you understood, the partnership has a large number of partners, but in Asia there is like a specificity. So any partners can work in the regional and its geography in the partnership, but some stakeholders team up together, like for example ADB and AFD, in order to implement and deploy the program at a regional level. So since 2099, AFD and ADB sign up MOU in order to develop the program. So with different components, like to develop sustainable urban mobility plans. Of course, through the SUMPs, as you understood, there is some objective to build capacities, but we try to go a little bit further in order to prepare priority projects and to implement some pilot projects. So currently, the ADB and AFD introduce a new phase for Mobilize Your City Asia program, the phase 2, and it was signed in the last November in Manila between AFD and ADB. Next. So as I was saying just before, the technical offer from Mobilize Your City in Asia basically is using all the methodological offer that the large partnership is providing, so from the SUMP until power transit, but also with our city member, we try to shape and to tailor the offer and to go towards a specific and innovative offer. I take one example that I put on the slide. If we are speaking about linking land use and mobility planning, so the integration of mass rapid transit system, in Asia, it rings the bell because of the development of BRT, MRT lines. And so, for example, the TOT subject is becoming a hot topic. So not only for large city, but also for medium-sized city. And so what we try to do with our member and to work when we are working all and close together, it's also to go into the development of technical studies. So what we did with some of our members in India, we were working on the transit interchange in Ahmedabad, or also in the improvement of one corridor in Kochi in India. Next. So I just summarize here the technical offer from Mobilize Your City in Asia. So we can work on SUMP. So with a city member, it can be a full SUMP, but also it can be a component of one SUMP. If a city has already like a range of data and that was done recently, we can refine, for example, the strategy or the priority into the projects, or we can also work into the preparation of some projects with developing a study in itself. So the development of the study, we are not going into the detail phase of the study because of the cost, but let's say it's a kind of pre-feasibility study, or we do additional survey in order to support an existing study. And into this this cycle, so it can be for the SUMP or a study, we have also some programs to reinforce the local capacity. So next. At the geography, what we can see, basically, we have a large scope, regional scope, from Georgia with Tbilisi until now PNG with Port Moresby, with in between Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia. So this is like the current picture of what we are doing and where we are working. But what I want to say to you is like each time where we're working in a different city, basically we are trying to provide the different services that the partnership is providing with the four areas that Nicolas mentioned just before. Next. So I will not go further into that, but beside the technical activity that we can have, we have also this advocacy part. Nicolas mentioned the MobiliseYourCity Asia regional event from last year, but also last year we conducted a stakeholder consultation in Phnom Penh with our local partners in order to define and to refine a potential study on a corridor for mass rapid transit. Next. So now we are digging a little bit in what is the SUMP and how do we do in the region in order to implement or at least develop a plan. Next. So first of all, what is important to see, it is what is a SUMP. So into the presentation of Nicolas, you understood that there was like some very important approach, like the EASI approach, to focus on surveys, to focus also in the approach that is revealing like all the transport modes that are used in a city. So the SUMP is providing this approach on climate change, on decarbonize aspect, and with something with strategic approach, priorities, and realistic and feasibility for the project that can be implemented. But I will come back on that after, but also there is a matter of understanding the territory where we are working, understanding the city in itself, its large geography, with considering the perimeter of the SUMP. So next. Currently, there is the first SUMP in the region was launched in the 2018, but so currently we had so far 6 different SUMPs and mobility studies that were achieved since 2018. And currently we have 3 mobility studies under preparation, so it's not launched yet, and 1 SUMP that should be launched that was launched with ADB like a few months ago, but it's still into inception phase. So next. So why also the partnership develops some guidelines for the SUMP, because basically the model or the matrix come from Europe and was established with the different partners, mobility planners in Europe. So the partnership appropriate and took those guidelines, and with the time develop their own guidelines and toolkits into and translated that for the global south cities, but taking into consideration some aspects that are very important, like, for example, the use of power transit, the limited public capacities into financing mobility projects, and also sometimes the lack of planning culture. So all that, I know that the colleagues from MYC are also sharing the material into the chat, so you can find this material accessible on the website of Mobilize Your City. Next. So what is also important to see it is that SUMP is a cycle. SUMP is I will dig into the 4 phases, but for each phases, we develop some aspects in order to support city members to develop SUMP. So on our website from the partnership, you can find the term of reference models for SUMP. You can find also some guidelines and toolkit for power transit, emission calculator, and what I want to just go later on the website, but what I want to say is, like, we are learning from our members, and we are developing, all methodological material from the SUMP and from the different studies that we are doing in Asia, Africa, and South America. Next. So for each phase of the SUMP, basically the partnership develop training materials. So when we start SUMP with a city, we have for any phase of the SUMP, we can provide a clear vision of what we will do and how we will do. And so what is important to see, and this figure is showing that this material was developed by a lot of different members of the partnership. So you can understand the huge collaboration that there is into the Mobilize Your City. Next. So the opportunity also to share the good practice and to have like discussion on the SUMP, the way we are doing that, and the result that we have. It's also shared among community of practice. We are organized into different regional community of practice, and the event that we screened just before with the event in Manila with the ADB was a community of practice event. Next. So I go now into what is the different phases of the SUMP. So it's organized in four phases. So I just take a short moment here. So the 4th phase, preparation and analysis. After that, development of the vision, the goal, the setting, and scenario building. And after that, measure and planning. So this is the 3 main phases that are at the beginning, what is the core of the SUMP. When we are speaking about those 3 phases, it's where basically a city member will develop that in, let's say, 1 year or maybe 1.5 years maximum. When we are speaking about the last phase, the implementation and monitoring phase, this is the implementation of the plan in itself. So you understand that it's a long-term vision, that it's a 15, 20, 30 years. So just to let you know that in terms of return of experience about the implementation of SUMP, we don't have yet. So next. So all the different phases, what we learned from our members, some illustration and some good practices are into the guidelines developed by Mobilize Your City. Next. So when we are at the phase 1, so so you understand that the partnership is providing the methodology. So everything is like fully accessible, freely accessible. So any city who wants to use this material can becoming a member and use this material. For those cities, for different cities that can get technical assistance, some consultants are assigned for the work. And but before to start this preparation and analysis phase, we are in touch with the city member, and we try to understand the situation, the problems, to gather the existing data, to have a clear picture of who is doing what in terms of transport and mobility in the city. Next. So this is the readiness assessment. The most important, it's basically to have a stakeholder mapping to understand the forces and also to try to also to discuss with the city member about different aspects of the mobility. For example, often the paratransit or the active mobility are not recognized as like clear way of for the moving of the people and the citizen, but this is the work of the stakeholder mapping. It's to understand who is doing what and who is providing what in terms of service in the city. And with like the last years and the development of the ride-hailing app, it's important also to have in mind that there is a lot of different stakeholders, and there basically it's a huge fragmentation of the stakeholders who are like providing mobility services. So in the first phase, we are identifying all that, the capacities, the resource, and the risk to develop the SUMP, what can be also the issues that a city into the context, natural risk, political risk, and all that, economic crisis, because just to remind us, I know it's now in our back, but we just went through the COVID crisis, and that had a huge impact in development of some SUMP. So next. So when we are like starting also and discussing with the cities that wants to jump into this SUMP, what is important is like to set up a technical and political committee. When I'm saying that, it's like it's important because if we don't have like some local partners who are able to carry on the political side and on the technical side a kind of project like that, because it will involve a lot of different stakeholders, the local stakeholders, but also international stakeholders. If we are speaking about like international consultant, if we are speaking about donors as ADB or AFD, it's important to have like something ready to know with who we can speak and who will speak to each other to ensure good communication. So to set up the working structure is a major work into the preparation of the SUMP. Next. After that, there is to determine the working plan and the planning framework. So the SUMP should have at the beginning some milestone. We are working with like 2 months to quarter to deliver some different surveys, to have also consultation with a lot of different stakeholders, civil society, NGOs, professional organizations, economic organizations and all that. But all that, this participation aspect should be organized and formalized early in the process. So that's why to determine the planning framework is also a very important aspect into the SUMP development. Next. So when we are speaking about analyze mobility situation, it is also important to have in mind that the SUMP can be a kind of momentum for a city in order to shift from traffic approach to mobility approach. So for that, we need a lot of different survey. We are speaking about housing survey. We are speaking so from the qualitative to quantitative survey, but also it's one aspect that Nicolas mentioned. We are working also in a way to reveal what is happening in terms of mobility. We have to highlight, a gender approach. Men, women who are moving in the city, sometimes it's not the same. The habits and the daily trip are not the same. We need to address all that and to have all that into the analysis. So this is important because like that we can identify the main problems. So for example, if we are doing a financial survey to know how a city can support the investment into public transport, into active mobility, for example, to develop a bicycle lane, to improve a crossroad, to have a safe crossroad for pedestrian. So this analysis mobility situation will give the opportunity to gather all the different stakeholders into that are involved into the city and to discuss about this diagnosis, to discuss, to have a clear and a common vision of how is the city, how do we move in the city, what are the problems, but also what are the opportunities. So I just remind you that the SUMP in Asia, for example, reveal the importance of power transit modes. That's it's one point, and the other point that is also often invisible. It's like the active mobility and the walk, the pedestrian, because often people do not mention that they are working in the neighborhood to go for grocery, to go to the market and all that, or just to go to take the power transit and all that. But the active mobility, the walk is basically the first means of transport. So the SUMP is highlighting all that and showing revealing the current way of moving of everyone. So this is why this approach of the analyzing the mobility situation is also very important in the SUMP cycle. Next. The second phase, so I was saying about the diagnosis. The second phase, and to share that the stakeholders have to share the diagnosis. The second phase is to elaborate a vision, a goal. What kind of city do we want? So next slide, please. So for that, based on the data that have been recorded, we are elaborating often different scenarios. So those scenarios, it's like business as usual. So it's like if you are doing nothing into the city, you don't improve the situation by introducing or modernizing the public transport. And that it will, you know, we were calculating also all that with the CO2 emission. So the business as usual, we do nothing. And after often what we are doing, it's like we are developing two different scenarios. One like intermediate scenario. So this one, it's like if we, for example, introduce or modernize the existing bus network, and we electrify the bus network. What can be the impact? What can be the result of all that? And so after that, we are also doing in the ambitious manners. Okay, let's say we have we can see that there is a potential with a corridor and to create a corridor for a BRT. What will be the impact of that? All that will also come with the reorganization of the existing bus, the integration of the transit service. So the consultants are doing the modelization of all that, and we of course at the end all that is discussed with the different stakeholders, and we encourage the city and the different stakeholders to go towards the ambitious scenario. Next. So basically it's what I just explained. It's like, what kind of city do we want? A city where it's more inclusive, more livable, where there is more space for pedestrian, more safety for kids in front of the school. So this is important to set and those objectives, and to share that with the stakeholders that are involved into the SUMP process. Next, please. So after this share goal and vision, where we want to go in terms of mobility, there is a clear work of the consultant about like developing the different major. And next, please. What is important into that? It is what can we do concretely, because the SUMP target to be realistic. Because it's not like to say, let's plan 5 MRT lines, because maybe it's not adapted to the city, but also to be honest, often a city cannot afford to have like 5 mass transit line as the metro. So the key aspect is to engage a discussion between the city, often after that the province, the national government, but also to have the donors. So that's why it's important to have the donors around the table about like how to finance the measure that can be implemented into the SUMP. Of course, there is like some aspects that are brought and developed, like land value capture, some stuff like that. But all that are discussed, and the consultants are going into the detail into each measure. There is a cost estimate. There is when this measure should be implemented, how long will it take, and what are the resources, not only the financial resources that are needed in order to develop and to go and to adopt a measure. Next, please. So after that, there is this work of giving priority to the project. So which project will be basically will have a great or a big impact at the beginning and can be leveraged to change the mobility pattern into the city. So we are giving priority to the different projects that are identified. Next. So now we end after when the SUMP is detailed with the major, we enter into the implementation. So when we are saying that the SUMP is completed, so it's like the work of the consultant, the work of the city is done. But after that, and I'm back to the phase one already, it's important to have a political leadership in order to be sure that this SUMP is adopted and we are going to the implementation. So next slide, please. What is important to have in mind, it is that in order to the SUMP become basically a public policy document that is alive, and the city and the Department of Transport and the different stakeholders will continue to discuss about this document. What we are supporting also with Mobilize Your City is to set up observatory of mobility, because the observatory of mobility can lead to the implementation and the monitoring of the implementation of the SUMP. So next, please. So now I will stop to talk. Because also the time is running. I just want to share with you one example of SUMP that have been delivered, done, completed. It is in Medan in Indonesia. So the city Medan, it's from the North Sumatra province. This city is about 2.5 million inhabitants. However, if we consider the greater Medan, so Mebidangro, the metropolitan area, we are reaching nearly 5 million inhabitants. So the Medan city and the Mebidangro area with the North Sumatra province became a partner of Mobilize Your City, and the SUMP for this area was supported and financed by the AFD. So after that, some consultant, it was the French consulting firm Aegis that was recruited to develop this SUMP, and this SUMP was completed. And after the completion of this SUMP with another French consulting firm, Espelia, we developed the video material that you will see right now, and gives you clearly the different phases of the SUMP. So next slide. I forgot to tell you one thing before the video. So it's just to tell you, you see the different the timeline of this SUMP. It was during the COVID time, and the consultant with the city and the different departments managed to conduct all the surveys and basically to go until the action plan. So the action plan is the phase 3 within 1 year. But you can imagine all the different issues that everyone faced in order to do the participation, to do the survey and all that during the COVID period. So I give you now please the next slide with the video from Medan.
pertama naik angkot dulu ke halte, terus setelah itu naik bus ke sekolah. Sama juga kalau pulang naik bus terus ke rumah lagi nanti naik angkot. Kadang mau jadi lama gitu, setengah jam.
In Indonesian cities in general, and in the case of Mebidangro in particular, road traffic's increase resulted in rising congestion levels, impacting people's commuting time and increasing environmental and social externalities, such as injuries, casualties, and air pollution. Indonesia has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 29% by 2030, which requires, among other things, to improve the sustainability of our mobility at the national and local levels. That's why the government of the North Sumatra province, in coordination with the cities of Medan and Binjai, as well as the regencies of Deli Serdang and Karo, launched a SUMP, which is a Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. This SUMP was developed with the financial and technical support from the French Development Agency and the innovative methodology from the MobiliseYourCity Partnership.
A Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, or SUMP, is more than a simple transport plan. It is a process where local stakeholders define common objectives to develop more sustainable mobility on the scale of a large urban area. SUMP defines the scope of the financing and implementation arrangements, as well as the monitoring tools for mobility-related measures and projects to improve both mobility governance and develop public transport infrastructure. The SUMP process supported the North Sumatra province and Medan city to find fundings to develop mobility projects contributing to reduce greenhouse gas emission and decarbonize urban transport system.
We conducted a diagnosis of urban mobility and carried out stakeholders' engagement considering social, technical, economic, and environmental opportunities and challenges of urban mobility in Mebidangro. For this, it was important to have a participatory approach, conducting surveys with Medan inhabitants as well as interviews, workshops, focus group discussions with all mobility stakeholders. Following the diagnosis, EGIS helped co-produce a vision and targeted scenarios to define the urban mobility wanted for Mebidangro and the main steps to be taken to get there. The process resulted in an action plan by collaboratively prioritizing and assigning the list of measures to local agencies responsible for implementation. This includes, for example, developing the first BRT line, the upgrade of the urban rail network. To track the implementation of those actions, we also developed an observatory on urban mobility following the Mobilize Your City guidelines by training a SUMP monitoring team at local agencies.
The Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan elaboration process facilitated key discussions among mobility stakeholders in Mebidangro towards the design of a common goal and vision. This process was successfully led by the North Sumatra province and included national authorities such as Bappenas. The SUMP process put Mebidangro's inhabitants at the heart of the discussions to improve their quality of life by offering them accessible, efficient, and safe public transport services. AFD is continuing its support to the government of Indonesia and North Sumatra province by financing the first BRT system for Medan, a project that was identified as a priority in the SUMP action plan.
So thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you understood that basically the video is following the steps to understand what is SUMP and the methodology. So next slide, please, Nicolas. I just want to make for you a quick recap. So with what we saw before with the different slide, what we saw in the video. So phase one of the SUMP is the diagnostic. The diagnostic in order to engage the stakeholders and to understand the mobility. Look at this figure, and you will see that finally the non-motorized transport is like a share of 15%, and among this 15%, the walk is a huge part and something very important. This is revealing the invisible part of the mobility in the city. Next, please. So, recap of phase two to elaborate the vision, the goal, the scenarios. So I was speaking about like the different major and all that. So here are, for example, the 6 different thematic package of major that have been identified in Medan. And so in each different thematic, there is the detail major to go really in the close to what the city should develop. So as you can see, we have like aspects on public transport, urban planning, but you see also some institutional measure for governance and, for example, to set up a transit authority. Next, please. So the last aspect is to have the forecast on the potential impact. So as you can see on this graph, it's like with the different measures that are proposed for the city, where can we be if we are doing this, implementing this project, developing this corridor, where we will be in terms of public transport user at different time, different year, if we develop those projects. So next, please. So all the expected impact of the Medan SUMPs are here. So 41 actions identified. It means that if all that is implemented, it's like the number of people who get access to formal transit will be multiplied by 5. The GHG emission will be decreased by 20%. The development of mass rapid rail with the network will reach 80 kilometers, and all that will contribute. The expectation, of course, to decrease the congestion on the road of 23%. But what we can see also, it's the last part. It's the investment approach that is, of course, the key in order to implement the SUMP with a first step or a target into 15 years with investment of 24 trillion of Indonesian rupee, that is more or less 1.5 billion USD. But basically, the SUMP is also forecast if everything is implemented, it requires nearly 4 billion of USD. So next slide, please. So what is important and what you have to see into the approach and what we are doing with Mobilize Your City is also it's like to help and to support our city member in order to go to the next step. And so, for example, here, and it was what was said into the video by the last interviewee, the AFD with the World Bank will support Medan into the development of the first line of BRT, and this line was launched already a few months ago. So again, it's not only an infrastructure. It's not only that, because you can see that there is like also this aspect of low emission zone. It's also coming with capacity building, and also with the support of setting up public transport authority. So I'm done with this presentation. I hope it's clear for now for you regarding the methodology of the SUMP and what is provided by Mobilize Your City. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any questions in the chat, so I think we will open the form for discussion. Anybody who wants to ask a question, they can unmute themselves and they can ask the questions, whatever they want, please. And at the same time, there's some questions posted in the chat for people, the audience, regarding what type of topic would you like to learn further about in the sustainable mobility planning. So it will give us an idea of what, if there should be a second lecture, or if so, what should be the topic of discussion. So please do answer them as well. Okay, I will start with the question. We in Pakistan, we have a lot of like master planning, urban transport master plan in developed for Lahore City. What is the difference between an urban transport master plan and the sustainable urban mobility plan? Or is this a part of the master planning full procedure or not?
Maybe I can start answering. I don't know if Clement also wants to specify for Asia. I take the opportunity to also talk about this topic guide that we prepared, Mobilize Your City, about linking urban and sustainable mobility planning. So it's how to link land use planning with urban mobility planning, because it's true that especially what I was talking about with the avoiding trips, this we can only do with good land use planning. And normally the master plan of the city includes all this land use planning. So where we're gonna allocate the activities, or we're gonna prefer some activities in spatially, let's say. And then normally, and in my experience, what I've seen is like the biggest infrastructure projects are included in this master plan, but because it's very related to the land that we use and how we allocate this space. And then the SUMP is, we can see it as a further development of the master plan, because it's not only the infrastructure and the spatial configuration of the city, but also everything that comes with it. Let's say the policy part, also some soft measures that we call it. So for example, all the pricing mechanism and how we develop mobility policy in a broader terms, not only on the infrastructure dimension. So they interact, but then sometimes you have the master plan that do not have like this sustainable vision, but then the SUMP can arrive and then complement a bit and change a bit the paradigm. Although in some other cases, the master plan is already properly done with this sustainable urban mobility vision, and then you can use the SUMP to give all these other measures that are not included in the master plan. Or you can do it at the same time, both at the same time, which is challenging, and it's not very frequent, but there are some cases also in which the master plan and the SUMPs are done at the same time.
I just want to add something about the SUMP approach and what is promoted into with Mobilize Your City. It is not only a master plan. It is also to engage the stakeholders, to engage a city. So, for example, in some case of the SUMP, what we are advising to the city is to organize mobilize days. It means to introduce, for example, one event to speak about mobility and to address that to the citizens. It can be one car free day. It can be a march. It can be a bicycle event and stuff like that. But what you have to see behind the technical approach of a master plan, the SUMP, or what is like promoted by Mobilize Your City, it's also to engage the different stakeholders and to engage the population, to bring the city to communicate on what they will do about the mobility, because often in certain contexts we can say that some cities are not communicating with the citizen about like the next plan or what they will do, about like different how they will solve the issue of congestion and all that. So yeah, I think it's this approach and this idea of participation, but also communication. It's something important to see into this approach of SUMP. It's not only technical; it's more than a technical plan.
Okay, thank you. Got the idea that it's more of a collaborative planning procedure rather than going direct to infrastructure projects. Okay, any questions from the audience? Okay, we have a question. Can you give an example of how gender and vulnerable group perspectives were integrated in the Medan SUMP? For example, there is a goal to increase level of formal public transport. Was there an assessment of how this will affect different genders and mitigation plan for this? Further, in terms of just transition, how will drivers of informal PT be affected?
So in the case of Medan, it was groups that were consulted by the technical team. So by like association, organization of women were consulted. But as you know, when we are speaking about mobility and how to include this approach of gender. I mean, from Mobilize Your City, we already have approach like I don't know, to integrate this aspect of safety, like the safety, the accessibility to a bus stop, the accessibility to a bus station, to have lights and everything, like to make people and especially women safe. But I will take another example, and maybe Muhammad and some other people who are in this webinar, you can be familiar with, or about that. It is this BRT project in Peshawar, where the Zoo Peshawar, where there was a big work in terms of inclusion of people, not only women but also disabled person and all that, and to create some space dedicated to women into the public transport in Peshawar. So it's like something that come to my mind directly, but like again on the Medan, it's in the process, into the process and the people, how to engage the stakeholders and to work closely with dedicated groups and identified groups.
Okay, right. So we have another question. Could you please talk about how you conduct household surveys and if there is a standard template adopted for these surveys?
So household surveys, basically you take, a sample. It's like you have, let's say, X million of inhabitants in the city, and you will take like X thousand of household to conduct interviews. You have a questionnaire, and this questionnaire will raise question about like the habits of how do you move, your different trips and all that, where do you go in the city and all that. And basically it can be done either by phone, or you can have also a team to conduct on-ground surveys. That basically we have on the Mobilize Your City SUMP cycle, we have one training that is dedicated to surveys that was elaborated by the consulting firm Aegis, and they are dealing with the household survey. So I don't have a standard template. But yeah, I explained more or less the methodology and the sample approach. But it's important to combine for the SUMP is using qualitative, so this is the household survey, and quantitative approach, like traffic surveys. So it's important to cross the data.
I would just like to add, if you check some guidelines that we sent on the chat, in the first phase, there is some methods proposed, including, for example, the methodology proposed by Cerema for household surveys. And then also you could check a publication, it's in Spanish though, but it's the experience of how the SUMPs done in Latin America, they adapted during the COVID period because it was not possible to do in-person surveys, in-person interviews for the household surveys, and then they used mobile data coming from the operators network. And this is something that has been increasing in popularity when doing a SUMP and collecting mobility data, because it's very specific. You can have segregated data by date with the socioeconomic information of the person, and then it also has its limitation. But now the data collection is also progressing, and it's going beyond only the household service and the traditional service that we used to conduct to gather data.
Yeah, if I can add, because in the Medan case, it was exactly what Nicolas said, because it was during COVID period, so the consultant had to add additional data, and so mobile phone data were required for that. But we also faced another issue with those mobile data. It's very comprehensive. It takes time to deal with the analysis of the data, and after that, it's the cost to access. It depends. All that depends of the country and the operators. I mean, it's more than what we are discussing now about mobility, but we know that data it's also important. It's and it costs. It can be a serious heavy burden for the development of the SUMP. So it's like something to think and to anticipate before.
Okay, we'll take one more question if there is any, although we have already gone past the 2-hour limit. So any question, any last question? Okay, no question. With that, I would thank our speakers, Mr. Nicholas and Mr. Clement. And at this end, I would like to thank the participants as well for being present for the entire 2 hours and understanding and learning new stuff and coming up with the questions. So thank you very much. And yeah, and the last word from the speakers.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, and do not hesitate to check out all the methodological and deliverables that are online on the MobiliseYourCity, because there is a huge work that is done by a lot of people, and especially the secretariat in Brussels, to collect and gather this information. So yeah, do not hesitate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.